Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we are going to introduce the episode first. So today's episode is a short interview about a short story. We're here to talk about A Touch of Aether, an urban fantasy anthology. This is the second story in that anthology that we've talked about, and I think you're going to really dig it. But before we do that, we're going to let our guest, Mr. Matthew Olaranont, I probably butchered that, but could you introduce yourself and say how to pronounce that last name?
Yeah, sure. Hello. I'm Matt Olaranont. Like it says in my other bio, Thai American veteran, U.S. Army. So that's how JR and I connected anyway. Been writing for quite a bit here. Just now kind of dabbling into the semi-professional field, get stuff out there. All of it so far is big short stories. I'm sure we'll get to that. And, this is another extension of that one. Glad to be here. Glad to be able to talk about stuff.
Yeah, you're actually in the writing accountability group. We meet every Monday and hold each other accountable for getting our words when life doesn't get in the way. And I just call you Matt there, so I don't have to worry about pronouncing your last name. But if by close you mean I was on the same planet, then I think I was close. But if by close you mean the same continent, I wasn't even in the same hemisphere.
I mean, it's all right. Everybody, you know how it is even with the Army. Like, all the drill sergeants are calling me, "Oh, get over here." Okay, that's me.
Yeah, well, with a name like Handley, I got a few. You can imagine the kind of humor that they used with my name.
Oh, yeah.
Which is probably not fit for public consumption, but at least yours, all they can do is mangle it. They couldn't turn it into a insult of any kind.
No. Although I know some of my the people I went to AIT with, they started calling me Ollie, and that kind of stuck for a long time. So it turned into like, who is it talking about? Like, oh, the one guy with the last name nobody can pronounce.
Did that cause problems when you were learning to spell as a kid?
Yeah, actually, I remember distinctly one time in I think preschool or something like that when I was first learning the letters, I put too many R's and A's in there, and too many O's and N's, and so it turned into like a triple and rather than a double.
That's cool though. I mean, you probably have the problem of when it comes to sign your name on signature blocks, there's never enough room.
Oh yeah.
Do you do the curve up or curve down when you don't fit on the line?
Yeah, even the name tapes on my uniform, they had to use the smaller font to get it all in there.
I can see that. All right, so since this is the Blasters and Blades podcast, we can't let you escape this interview without talking some religion questions. So, Big Trouble in Little China, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension, or Zoo, Warriors from the Magic Mountain.
Well, out of those three, I'm definitely picking Buckaroo Banzai and just lamenting how big of a travesty it was that we never got a sequel movie made in the 80s because they were really setting up for it and we just never got there. Although I will say that it was really funny seeing the fact that they made a sequel novel. I haven't read it yet, but it came out a handful of years ago, actually.
Nice. All right. And because we are polytheistic, Hellboy, Bright, or The Crow?
Out of those, I'm picking Hellboy, mostly because I think I've only ever seen the Bright movie, or no, the Netflix special or what it was, and that never really sat well with me, and it's been so long since I've seen The Crow, I can't really give you an opinion on it.
All I remember is the main character, the actor, died in this filming, right?
Yeah. Bruce Lee's kid.
Yeah, was it Brandon Lee, I think?
Yeah. They had like a blank that just went off in the wrong gun or something like that, and like shot out something, just tagged him.
Yeah, well, I mean, even blanks are deadly if you get in too close to the line of fire, because even the wrapping for the powder can cause damage. That's what most people don't realize. Blanks can still kill you if you don't follow gun safety.
Yep.
It's a lot harder, but it can happen. All right, and because we like to do these in sets of 3, the 10th Kingdom, Once Upon a Time, or the Bureau of Magical Things, and all of these people are on Netflix and came on cable back in the day.
The questions just keep getting harder and harder because I have no idea what any of those are and I haven't seen them.
Well, they're all good, so there's no wrong answer. What was your favorite urban fantasy TV series then?
I had this one small soft spot for when they tried to adapt the Dresden Files, if you remember that show. Because they adapted it in such a way, like in retrospect, it wasn't a good show, but I saw at that time of my life where everything was amazing. So I was like,
Yeah.
man, I loved what they did. And then I came back to it and I was like, oh, I don't love what they did, but I'm glad they tried.
There was another one. I'm trying to draw a blank on. There was a show about another dimension invading ours. There's an overlap. I can't remember what it was called.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried Googling it real quick, and yeah, that doesn't get me anything. I'm going to remember as soon as we hang up.
Oh yeah, that's just how it
works. It had it created a military type organization like the FBI to like investigate and try to stop the expansion. And what I remember about it is the main character's son died of some sort of issue, and so he went to a parallel universe to steal the version of his son in that universe. And when he stole him, of course, it caused the worlds to start merging.
Oh, yeah, that does sound like a pretty good one.
It was good. When it was on Fox, so of course it died because that's where good shows go to die.
Yep.
At this point, I'm almost leery about starting any kind of like show that's aired by Fox.
Because a lot of shows these days are also just like not really trying at all. I see a lot of big failures, not a lot of shows that people are recommending anymore. Like I'd still go back and watch like Eureka or Warehouse 13 or any of those other ones. Like Warehouse 13, I guess, was urban fantasy too.
Yeah, it was.
That classic era of like the early 2000s sci-fi channel where they're just like, yeah, let's just throw ideas against the wall and see what sticks.
It's unfortunate. If you remember the show about two universes merging, dear listener, because now I want to watch it again and I can't remember what it's called. So you're gonna have to tell me if you know what I'm talking about. It had X-File vibes, except for it was about like merging dimensions, parallel dimensions to ours. But anyway, all right. I think we've digressed enough. Dresden Files. I never really got into that one, but I didn't read the books either. You could be right. It could have been awesome. In case you missed it, dear listener, we're talking about the unifying theme for all of these is that they're urban fantasy. So we're going to talk about the anthology, A Touch of Aether, an urban fantasy anthology. So I'm going to read the blurb and rest assured that the voice trailer guy on the theater, like he's got his job for another day is what I'm trying to tell you. So in the heart of the city, magic is real and it's dangerous. Get ready for a wild ride through dark streets where monsters roam, magic crackles, and heroes fight shadows at every turn. From wizards to vampires, gods to shapeshifters, these stories will drag you into a world where the impossible is just another day. The city's secrets are about to be unleashed. Are you ready? Dun dun dun! I feel like I need a dramatic music in the background, so I'm gonna like give it my own. Don't worry, dear listener, I will not start singing. I promise. I'm not that cruel. So Matt, what would you consider? Because defining terms is important. What is urban fantasy to you?
Well, the short blurb to me is that urban fantasy is fantasy in trench coats and suits instead of robes and peasant wear.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you got everything going on just adjacent to, it could be just adjacent to the real world, like say Dresden Files, where everybody denies the existence of magic except for the people who are directly involved in it, all the way up to just, the fantasy world that you have grown accustomed to has, aged up a few hundred years and they developed technology around it and a modern culture.
One of these days, I'm going to figure out the difference between urban and paranormal fantasy because they seem like the same thing to me.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's only if the Wendigo is in it.
Maybe. All right. So, what is it about urban fantasy that appeals to you?
Well, I just like the idea since urban fantasy is set in a thing that is familiar, that you give it that twist where it's like, well, now there's magic involved. Now there's gnomes. Now there's various other magical races that just didn't exist in a normal setting. And how they would react to said normal setting and how all that plays out.
Okay. That's a good reason. And what was your story in this anthology called?
Mine was called An Eye for Royalty.
Okay. So obviously this is a quick episode for a short story about an anthology. So what would be a quick synopsis of this short story?
So it's centered around a case for the Nimble and Scales Detective Agency, and our two intrepid detectives are Griff Hardlock and Earl Thor Zendrax. Griff is a gnome, Earl Thor is a dragonborn, and the case comes in as a murder that they're called out to investigate. They find a magical artifact that's an eye. It's a crystal that has the name of the eye for a large-scale dragon clan, and from there they have to figure out how it got there, why somebody killed somebody over it, and the people that may be in danger from it.
Okay, now is this a standalone story or does it fit in? I mean, you've got 2 or 3 other anthologies out with stories you've written. Are they all in the same universe or is this a standalone?
So this one is actually the very first story of an expanding universe. I got started with Griffin Earl, so the Nimble and Scales Detective Agency will return. They're coming out with more anthologies. I believe one with you, the dragon one that's coming out, Fires of Retribution.
Were you in volume 1 or volume 2?
I don't recall. I believe it's volume 2. You can fact check me on that in the liner notes.
So volume 1 for Fires of Retribution is coming out March 24th, and then got Cogs and Cutlasses is March 31st, I believe, and then he's doing the Space Coasties and coming back to Fires of Retribution. So they're all starting to come out now. The publishers got them on the fast track at the moment. So looks like you're going to get more content out there. So what is the inspiration for this story?
Well, for this one in particular, I actually started with Griffin Earl because Griff was a D&D character I made for one campaign where wouldn't it be funny if there was like a little gnome Humphrey Bogart, a little private eye and so he plays out, and I just like having him contrasted with his much larger partner who is a dragonborn. So like think of a 3.5 foot tall gnome and a 7 foot tall dragonborn guy. And so Griff is, hard drinking, hard swearing, hard smoking, all that stuff that you expect out of a good private eye. And his partner Earl is very polite. And very reserved. I would compare him to Teal'c out of Stargate SG-1.
Okay. Would you consider this almost noir if you got the private eye?
Yeah. It's a kind of film noir, urban fantasy, going for the vibes. And even when it isn't, those two showing up on scene will make it feel into kind of a noir vibe.
Okay. So what can you tell us about the main character other than he's a PI? Is there anything you could give us a little bit about him?
Well, like I said, he's a gnome, and the two main characters, because I would say Earl Thor also sits in there, but they are in a world that has been ravaged by a fairly large-scale war, and they're both veterans of it. And he fought on what was called the Chiropteran Front, which is TBD. I will plan on having more stories exploring all that era as well.
Okay, so have you built the whole big backstory of the world, or are you kind of exploring it as you go?
Exploring it as I go. I have some large piecemeal things, and I'm kind of building cultures as I go. Like in my particular world, they're in a large city-state. Working title so far is that it's just called Westfall, but all of the magical races are there in their own little sections of town with are essentially ghettos and stuff, and they're just living together. And mysteries happen, and sometimes there's the politics of the dragon mafia over there has beef with something with the lizards and so on and so forth.
So is this second world fantasy, or is this Earth that's just different?
It's a second world fantasy for sure.
Okay. And since we promised this would be a short interview, and you've been clear and concise, it's all that language training, I'm sure. A fun one for the road. Would you live in this world if you could?
You know what? I would definitely vacation there. I don't know if I would live there full time, especially with how much murder seems to be happening.
Okay. So before we let you go, dear listener, this is the part where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right reader find the right books. So do your part. It really does make a difference, especially for debut authors, small indie publishing houses, et cetera, et cetera. And if when you read the anthology, any one or two or all, whatever stories stick out to you, if you could mention those in the reviews, the authors will love you, because I mean, reviews are reviews, and if they all review the same one, it's the same, like the effect is the same to the algorithm. But if there's one that you particularly like and you mention it by name, I guarantee the author will love you forever, and they might even sacrifice their unicorn to you. So who knows? This could be a good thing for you. So Matt, where can listeners and viewers find you on the wild interwebs?
Well, I'm on Amazon, as we said before, but I also run another podcast myself called Yet Another Writing Podcast with a couple of friends of mine named Adam and Jonathan. And we're found pretty much wherever your favorite podcasts live, as Yet Another Writing Podcast presented by the Illiterate Bastards.
And we will link to all the podcast links depending on what platform, because they're across all of them. And we'll link to Matt's Amazon store where you can check out his books. You can find us, dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Twitters. We link to our Spotify, our Discord channel, which is newly set up, dear listener. We announced that yesterday's episode, where we reviewed The Mist. We have our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. For professional purposes only, people. Save the shenanigans to Stabby over there on Instagram, the Twitter, and your email. You can support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that it's for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee till they can swim in a river of Java. Man, that actually might hurt if the coffee's hot. Maybe we should do iced coffee instead. Probably for the best. Anyway, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next time at the same time next week, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. And in case you didn't hear where I forgot to say, see what I did there, people? I'm blaming you. If you go to the link in the show notes, code podcast Grunt, you get 10% off that coffee brand coffee. We get a little bit of a kickback. It's a win-win, people. So do your part. And if we entertained you today, please click the like and subscribe button. Share it around to your friends. It really does make a difference. And with that, I will say good night or good day. Boom. Wait for it. Wait.